Welcome everyone to the dRep white paper working group meeting number 6, I think we're at. And this is another community review meeting. I'll just share briefly the agenda. I think we maybe, if we could do brief updates, but there's only 4 of us here. I've got nothing really to update, but apart to point out that this week is on Thursday, I think it is, Jack O'Brien's going to do some dRep workshops. So that will be the second part of where the voting centre will be presented. So I'd just like to highlight that. Kenrick and Andre and Steph, or Kenrick, would like to just give a quick update. If we just do a quick go around, just
yes, okay, I can go first. Yeah, so I'm doing very well. Had a good Labor Day weekend here in New England, and really looking forward to this month working with the team to conclude our work on the paper.
Andre, would you like to just give a sentence or two on how you are?
Hello everyone, thanks, good to be here. Last time I added quite many comments, no new comments. I'm looking forward to this workshop. I signed up. There will be actually 2 workshops in 2 different to cover. I think it's more to cover bigger geographies. After that, I hope this will also bring some newer information. Depending from our timeline, if there will be one more window to contribute, I would be happy to do so when I get more information. And also looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Andre. Steph, would you like to just say a sentence or two?
I'm great. Enjoying working on the paper, and we're close.
Cool. And I think there isn't any updates, particularly on the budget, is there, Kenrick? Or
other than simply, I'll be putting together what I'm proposing as the rewards for the different contributions to the review. Right. I think what I might do, since there's a smaller group here today, is send out an email to everyone and get kind of a group confirmation that they agree with that. And the way I'm planning to do it is to have kind of a baseline that everyone that made a contribution gets a reward, and then just kind of look over and where we see that there was some extra effort put into the reviews, give kind of a bonus for those individuals.
Okay, that's great. I'll update the documentation for that. On the research project planning, I did the monthly report as part of CGO, just updating that we did the meeting. We did 2 meetings in August. I just completed the documentation for that and posted it out this week. And then did a quick experimented with a quick explainer, trying to highlight what are the major points we're discussing. So I might try and experiment with this as well to try and draw attention to what we're doing more, and then put that out in social media. But that's really on the research project planning. I took your summary in your email, Kenrick, and just pasted it in here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's part of why I did it, as I realized, you know, in order to put the agenda together, it's helpful to have some input from me. Yeah. So great.
It's just provides a focus. So if we just return back to if I put it over to you now, Kenrick, and I've also got the paper here, we can, whether do you want to do a screen share, or do you want to go through these items?
Yeah, I can do that. And so as I said in my email yesterday, the expectation is that you completed your section by today's meeting. Now, I know that's not quite the case, but what I'd like to do today is get any final inputs from the reviewers, any partly want to make sure that they feel that their suggestions were addressed, Any other suggestions? And then with each of the lead authors, we'd like to set like a deadline of when they feel they'll be truly complete. And after we've done all that, I also want to review how to use the Sotera tool again, because I think that's something that it has kind of been left to the end, but we don't want to neglect having a good set of citations in the paper.
Okay.
So if we just go down, if I just review where we are with the paper first, and then we'll get some more input from Andre.
Could you share your screen on that on the white paper,
yes,
and then just so you can, for the sake of the recording. So we're going to be reviewing the comments that have been made so far first.
Yeah. And before we do get to the comments, I'll just give an overview where we are in each section.
Okay, great.
So there is an introduction. In our last meeting, Thurston had agreed to take a effort at summarizing the other 3 sections. That's not complete yet, but I'll be in contact with Thurston to make sure he can do that, and I'll be supporting him on doing that. Phil Lazo has not been able to join our most recent meetings, but he is making very good progress on his section. Hopefully, well, what we can do there is either set up a separate meeting with him to review his section, or hopefully the next meeting we can finalize that. Steph has quite a bit of new input that we'll be going over today, and he and I are working closely on that. Likewise, Aaron's section is coming along well, and I have some suggestions that I've written up in there, and we can talk about more as we progress in the meeting. So let me just see. Yeah, so I had put a note in here at the beginning. I think the 2 things to complete on this section are to revisit this section here and just make sure everything looks all right. In fact, I haven't addressed all the comments yet, so that's on me. And then, as I said, Thurston is going to do an abstract style paragraph or 2 to introduce the other sections. Phil's section, I didn't read this week, but I had read a week or 2 ago, and is coming along very well. Andre, did you have comments about Philip's overview of delegated representation?
Those comments which I left on the crypto text, that's my name.
Okay.
These comments, but nothing new. For example, about this example on the pirate party, I was thinking maybe why that particular parties were chosen, and maybe add more links. Actually, all the comments I left there.
Okay. As I said, Phil's not here, but if you want to expand upon your comments, now would be a good time, and it will be recorded. And then he will be addressing them. And I see he's commented on some of these already.
Could you scroll back up to where it mentions the pirate party, Kenrick? Okay, that's probably just there as, yeah. I mean, that's kind of often a standard reference to where it's been used before in terms of liquid democracy. But are you just saying, Andre, that they should be links, URL links, to provide further material?
Yeah, links, and also why these 2 particular examples.
Okay.
So maybe to elaborate more, what is the essence of liquid democracy, and how because for me it was like not so understandable. So how it is applied there. For example, in some parties, I know they have so-called open lists. So before running to parliaments, they have the inner party election. So actually, this means that the party itself, they can choose who will run, and this actually gives. I know that Baltic states like Lithuania has this, Latvia has this. So it gives like for new people and people without like a lot of money and support gives more possibilities.
So if Philip's watching the recording, maybe a sentence or two that expands upon that a little bit, yeah, and then maybe some links to further information.
Yeah, and let's get through the other sections first, but we can use that maybe as an example to add. So I'll go through the steps of adding a citation.
Sure.
For example, it was not so clear for me, do they just like liquid democracy, or they propose it to change, to implement democracy on the national levels, or they already implemented it in the party levels.
Right.
So,
okay.
It was not so understandable.
Yeah.
But also, if there will be a separate call with Philip, I can join it some other day. So to speak more, and before that, I will reread this section again.
Okay. So you were over to you, Kevin, because you were talking about the citations. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's keep scrolling through here then. Thank you, Andre, for that input.
Then there was a small point, actually Andrew Fraser mentioned it, about malicious voters. And it sounds that, and I think we need to assume that all ADA holders, all ADA voters, they are not malicious. So, and especially in white paper. And the voters, they just they vote with their ADA. We don't have, of course, equality, because some people have zero ADA, they can't vote. Some people have millions ADA. But just this the term malicious voters, it's kind of little bit. Some people might be upset.
Let me look, because I think malicious, some of these terms have technical meanings. They're not really intended to be disparaging of anyone, but in order to build these systems, you have to defend against malicious behavior. And for instance, in Steph's section, there's use of the word dictator to represent when a particular voter has acquired all of the power. Even though you have a voting system, the system may allow someone to actually have all of the voting power, in which case they're considered to be a dictator. These are not disparaging terms, they're technical terms about the system. So let me find the reference though, and let's just check it.
Yeah, sure.
So let me do a search for it here.
Because in the case of the dictator, you could become a dictator by accident, couldn't you? It may not be intentional. Yeah. Malicious voters, okay.
Yeah, so here's the question. Why are voters abstaining? Is it random? Is it information? Is that, and so.
Yes, you responded there, and that's also different. So voters who are abstaining and malicious voters, it's different. As I understand, the malicious voters are those who try to manipulate. In case of dReps, we might assume that there might happen that some dReps might become malicious, especially if they would.
Was that put in there by Philip? Or
that's in Philip's section.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Philip needs to expand upon that or edit it, or because it does seem to need some qualification.
Yeah, I don't mind the word malicious so much as I the context doesn't seem quite right with regard to voters abstaining. So that is something.
Maybe this in the term that if voters and the majority of voters are not malicious, if they are abstaining, it gives more power to malicious voters who are smaller in the number, but they will never abstain, so they will vote. They have maybe their bad motivation to vote.
Yeah, maybe that's the way it could be said. It's how does abstaining affect the threat of a malicious voter?
I mean, the way that's worded, it seems exogenously implies that they're not motivated. They're not motivated by anything within the system. So they are extrinsically motivated outside the system, which could be malicious and could not be malicious. It just means that they are not motivated internally to the system. That's how I read that. But I think it may be up to Philip to reword or edit.
Yeah. All right. Okay, very good, Andre. These are helpful comments. And scrolling forward here, there's some other ones that he needs to address. But as I said, let's see, there is one more comment here in his section, I think. Which you have a comment here, Andre, maybe to write something like the choosing particular proposals over others in an act of political will by voters and delegating to particular dRep is also an act of political will to choose one whose voting decision would be as close as possible to the delegated. What was the context of that comment? Do you remember?
Context. It was it's ideological decision. So, ideological decision.
Okay. Ideological defense.
Yeah, I see. Do you mean that ideological is quite a loaded word, Andre?
More ideological, it's more like for the ordinary political systems, where the left-wing parties, right-wing. And here I meant that also in a way the dReps will have their own ideology, but more that conception of how to vote, their perception and sympathies. And maybe that's in a way that some will prefer certain geographies, some will prefer, let's say, community building over the development, and some vice versa. And this is the decision how to vote. It's a political will, and the voters, they will delegate to those dReps who vote in a most similar way of how they would vote.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, there's, I mean, I think ideological is slightly a strong way of putting it, unless it refers to a technical expression, Kenrick. I'm not sure if it does. But I see why you might choose political will, Andre, because it's slightly less strong. It's more saying this is the way people think politically about this. And to say, like Kenrick, if I described an opinion of yours as your political opinion, that's less strong than saying your ideology, you know. So that's
a good point.
Yeah, unless it's a technical term, which I'm not aware of. But
okay, and now why don't we go to Steph's section? And one thing I was going to suggest is, I'll make a comment here just as a reminder. Once, obviously that comment there can be removed now. I think you've addressed those stuff. And then maybe I'll just do, let's see, I'll make it as a comment. Just move this before the introduction.
Yeah, it's also kind of contradictory, because what we have in Catalyst, it's the opposite. we have like 1 ADA, 1 vote. So one person might be 1 million votes, and another person might be only the minimal threshold, like 500, or maybe I think in some time it might be lowered, because I remember when Catalyst started, the minimum of ADA was 8,000 ADA. So maybe some day it will be even 1 ADA. Of course, 1 ADA, you'll need transaction fees, so 100 ADA. So this is.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the quote is just to kind of, democracy is one person, one vote. So we gotta motivate why we're even talking about why we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
What, right, Andre? Anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
And
Well,
I left
anyway,
that comment at the top.
It's a nice quote. We can think about whether that's the right quote for this section, but it's a nice quote.
I see your point, Steph. You're saying it's like a rhetorical statement at the beginning, so it's like a provocation in a way. That's how I'm reading it, because we are in a plutocratic voting situation. And the question is, maybe, is it a plutocratic voting? Is that democratic? That's a good, interesting question.
Yeah.
And so I just read it as a provocation, but maybe that's not so clear. It could be quite. You could be saying, well, hold on a second, this isn't democratic, kind of thing, But I think it's quite good
also,
fun.
it meant that 1 dRep, 1 vote.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're not doing that, are we? So.
Wait, so is 1 dRep going to be 1 vote?
I would say, Steph, is that,
well,
I like the idea of using this as like an epitaph to start your section. But then when you actually start the section, if you're going to refer to it, you'll have to use his name and maybe even add the citation to where that quote comes from in that first sentence.
I suppose 1 dRep. Well, no, they don't. They're not 1 dRep, 1 vote, because they have differing power, don't they?
Yeah. So it's just gonna be if my 500, the dRep gets 500, and your 1,000, dRep gets 1,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
There will be 1 transaction as a vote, different power, but 1 transaction.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha. Yep.
So I think this definition section is very helpful. I like what you did here. I haven't proofread the whole thing, and if others have a chance, that would be great. But I plan to go through that section a little bit more. But the basic concept of laying out these different terms is quite helpful. So
And I think it makes sense to add dictator and veto power potentially in there as like the technical terms. Based on what I heard y'all talking about earlier. Yeah. Do you think that makes sense?
Certainly dictator. And what's there is
veto.
Veto.
No, I wouldn't worry about veto, because I think that one's odd. But the opposite, why don't you even put it as 1 definition?
Okay. Yeah.
You have dictators and dummy voters.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, the opposite of a dictator is a dummy voter who votes, but their vote doesn't influence the outcome.
Is there a neutral term in between?
In other words, using this Bondox index, you get a probability of influencing outcomes between 0 and 1, or you can think of it as between 0 and 100%.
Yeah,
100% is a dictator, and 0% is a dummy voter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good thing to add. Yes, maybe right after either critical player or power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting how you define the index definition. I suppose that's at the highest level.
That
but-
one there is, but I defined it earlier in more of like lay term. I took that from the paper. So
Yeah.
if you go up, like I think there's a more reasonable definition at the very top.
Yeah.
And I can remove this. It does. I don't.
Yeah,
Maybe it doesn't necessarily help.
I don't, yeah, I'm having trouble understanding that one.
This one is one sentence, basically. An index which measures the ability of each voter to change the outcome of a vote.
Yeah.
You could stop there.
You could. That's an interesting framing. It's not really, yeah. I suppose I'm just thinking of how to do, because I was thinking of doing a little explainer just on the bands off power index and how
let me after the call take a crack at revising this. I like the first sentence, but I'd rather the rest of it be the technical definition in words rather than in equation. And I think I can do that. I'll follow close. We can reference that paper that we reviewed in our last meeting on this question, and then I'll just follow that definition very closely, but put it in words rather than equation.
It'd be great if you put it in words, Kenrick.
Yeah.
I think the one that's there at the bottom might help.
I'll take a look at that also, but
Yeah.
I didn't follow that, but I'm doing this quickly right now too. So
Yeah.
Sure. What's your opinion on including Seth and Jesus, who's my colleague? They didn't actually write anything specific in this paper, but they helped on like the calculations.
I think it's critical to add them, actually. I'm glad you did, because it doesn't, a co-author isn't just who's doing the writing. If someone contributed technical content to the section, then they should be co-authors unless they have a reason why they don't want to be. So yeah, I'm glad you did that. I almost mentioned it in our one-on-one call.
Okay.
So that's good.
Okay. And you got an example. It's nice you got the example afterwards as well. That's
yeah, there's two examples. One is with just abstract 2-player systems, and then there's the one that has the Cardano Foundation, which I think Andre had a comment about, should we include it, which is why I wrote an scroll back up a little.
Okay.
This is Andre's comment here to the right. And then I wrote an acknowledgement at the top of that section just to kind of address that, but I've left the comment.
I think we discussed this a little bit last time or previous time. So I just meant that maybe it's better to take the example like from the catalyst voting, because here people who are not so knowledgeable, they might confuse this the basic Cardano governance and how it started. So this 7 Genesis case and the influence of IOG, CF, and Emurgo with their influence in the catalyst, because in the catalyst voting, they are just 3 big ADA holders, and they vote maybe, maybe not, because hard to tell. I don't have enough information. Definitely, some people from all 3 entities definitely they vote.
I hear what you're saying.
Let me just say this. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Andre, but I think there's a simple way around that, and that's just to explicitly say at the beginning, maybe Steph, here is a familiar example from Cardano that is not related to Project Catalyst. Okay, just say that up front. Okay. And why we're using this Cardano example is because it's of interest in itself, the Genesis keys. Okay, it's not related to voting in terms of Catalyst, or it's related to the holding of those keys. Okay.
Yes.
And just say that really, this is nothing to do with, I think you need.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
What I would change those steps is I wouldn't do this as an italicized bold acknowledgement. I would just
Okay.
have it. I would just add one sentence, setting up the example, and then as Steve is saying, just include in that sentence that this is not related to catalyst voting.
Yeah.
But I'll also just emphasize again, I think this is a critically important example that I want in the white paper for two reasons. As Steve pointed out, it's of strong interest to the Cardano community. I actually think this issue deserves follow-up, maybe even with another catalyst proposal to dig into this issue further. Second, it's a fantastic, simple example. It's very concrete. Whereas we now do, and we'll see it, Steph has just completed the analysis on the Cardano catalyst voting, but that's so complex, and we only can do a approximate model right now. So it's useful to have a simple case where we have the exact model. So this is a simple case relevant to the Cardano community. Let's not go over it further because we went into that quite a lot in our last meeting. And now in this new section called analysis, Steph has laid out how he's going to approach the analysis of the catalyst voting. And what we're using here is the data that Fotrec gathered during Fund 4 and 5. So that gives us a basis for doing actual analysis on the voting power for an actual catalyst rounds. And maybe, okay, good. So you added, that's great. So you've added the figure numbers.
Yeah, they still need work, but
that's
they're
fine.
placeholders.
This is a much better way to do it. And when the editors go through this, we'll tie the whole thing together with probably something like a section number first and then point to. Is probably the best way to do it. Just for the sake of the audience watching the video, how about if we walk through each of the figures you've done, Steph, and just give a little introduction to the figures and what they mean.
Okay, this one is the distribution of wallets in terms of size. So on the left-hand side, the y-axis is the number of wallets in a particular size. So that first purple bar says that there's about 8,000 wallets that have 1,000 or less in weight, meaning 1,000 or less in ADA tokens. And then each successive bar is the next, it's just to show the distribution of wallets bucketed. And the final bar, the blue one, it shows that there's few wallets that have a weight of close to 50 to 100 million.
Right.
It's
okay.
maybe not I would like to get more detailed and show some breakouts, but that's what that one is.
That's good. That's helpful. And then why don't you explain figure 3?
This one is the accumulation of voting power with each successive wallet added. So from the very bottom left, we start with the smallest wallet, which is 450 ADA, and each new dot adds the next smallest wallet all the way up to the largest wallet at the red at the top. And this just shows that each successive wallet is like a linear increase until you get to that upper end where you can see that the amounts begin to double at an increasing rate. And so it's kind of shows that there's a concentration of wealth that takes off at that upper right hand edge.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize here, this line here is on a log scale. So this is still, even in this domain, it's still an exponential increase in wealth. But then, as you're saying, it really blows up as you get to these larger wallets. So that's quite interesting. All right, so let's keep going here.
Here's a question. It's
Yeah.
there's a difficulty. One of the comments was, I don't think you need to put in visuals, but you know, obviously those visuals are easier to represent numbers. So that's kind of why those are starting to appear here.
Yeah, no, graphs are, if the commenter was here, I'd be happy to understand their point more, but this kind of detailed analysis and the graphs are critical to what we want to accomplish. This is quite important. This is what we were driving towards.
Okay. Well, the graph that's down on the next page is, we broke out the distribution of wallets into wealth cohorts, and that this is a chart of the minimum and maximum size of the wallet in each cohort. So those first two bars, the yellow and blue, are the size of the smallest and largest wallet in the first cohort, all the way through the next 10. And this just shows that we've separated the wallets by size. And there's a bullet point below there that says the weight of each cohort. I can detail that on this graph, which will make it easier, and I can get rid of those numbers.
Well, what I'm wondering though is, how does this graph relate to the concern about dictatorship? It feels like you're introducing that word early.
Yeah, because in the so the result is just there in a bullet point. It's just, here's the two bullet points below it are just, here are the weights of all of those cohorts, and then here's the bands off index. It's 1 0 0 0 0 0, and it's a dictatorship. So it is.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe it's just organizing this information and modifying the caption
Yeah,
a little bit.
This stuff just kind of got put in here. It is still a bit of a placeholder, but I do recognize that
you know what
visual.
You know what I recommend, if you can, then, is the following. Why don't you have another bar, maybe with the color red here, and show that bar would be the bands off power index, and maybe you would even have like a axis on the right here that would go from 0 to 1. And the point here is, and this is kind of why I wanted this analysis done, is it turns out that the top 10% of wallet holders, if they were able to form a coalition and decide together, would form a dictatorship within the Catalyst community. And that's the kind of thing that I don't think even the people who are designing Catalyst and want it to be a decentralized community are fully aware of just how skewed the power is and what the potentials for it to be very centralized rather than decentralized.
Just to clarify, Kevin, is that a general rule? So if any top coalition of the 10% decide to do that, that will always result in a dictatorship?
No, it's unique to the wealth distribution. It goes back to how the wealth is distributed.
Sure.
It has to do with the fact that it has to do really with this steep curve here. And so what Steph had done here is broken the wealth cohorts into 10% quantiles.
Yeah.
And he found that the top 10% formed a dictatorship.
If they form a coalition.
If they form a coalition, yeah. We have to make approximations right now because the full analysis is combinatorially impossible to calculate.
Right, because the top 10% is a decile. It is, if they don't form a coalition in that top 10%, it's not necessarily a dictatorship. That's what I'm saying, is it?
Right.
Correct. That's in the next one. If you say that you just split the coalitions into 10 random segments, then you get you get essentially closer to equality across. So you can either have high concentration as a dictatorship, or you have random coalitions form and you get a much more equal outcome. So those are the two ends of the extreme.
Right.
And then can we be a bit more specific about it? And that's when we broke into a different set of logic, which was let's take any wallet that has between 50 and 5,000, or 5,000 and 50,000, or 50,000 and 500,000, all the way up to 50 million. The group with 50 million or more just has 2 voters in it. And even if they decide to become a coalition, aren't able to be dictators about it.
Yeah.
That's his final point. Yeah, and I want to make sure we move on to the next section.
Yeah.
But my big comment here is, with each of these plots, add a third bar that's perhaps the color red, and use a second y-axis on the right that would be the bands-off power index between 0 and 1. And that will be a nice chart because you'll have both kind of the wealth distribution on the y-axis to the left, and then how that translates into the bands-off power index on the right.
Got it.
Yeah, it's great to see these visualizations, by the way. I think it really brings it to life, visualizations. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
The bottom is just a little bit of fun because if you keep going down, it just basically says like, here's why it's computationally complex, which I understand now. And it takes like millions of years to calculate if we were to do all 32,000. So it's just
you might have to cut some of this in, or it can be part of a separate paper, but
it's in an appendix section, so it could get like
content here. But I also want to keep it balanced with the other sections. You know, so some of that in the final editing might come out.
Cool.
But it's really terrific. I appreciate everything you've put together here, Steph. All right, so let's take a look at Aaron's section.
Yeah,
and this one.
So actually, I most of the comments that this section received, also your comments, were about the structure and the context of this section to the rest of the paper. I could not find a way to solve it directly every comment, so I actually rewrite the whole section. It is kind of different. Some of the paragraph have been reused, but the form, the structure itself is completely different now. Just before the beginning of this meeting, I've sent you a link because I wanted to keep. I didn't want to edit it on this doc.
Yeah, I understand. Let me open that link and we can go over your new part. And while I'm doing that, I'll just comment that as I read through it and made comments, yeah, I think that's the big thing is we need to kind of we need to take everything you've accomplished here and now put it in the context of how the dReps organization is formed and what the dReps are going to do with regard to representing their people who are staking with them, and also how they interact together.
Yeah,
And
so,
if you can, in that context, and perhaps that's what you've done, so let me open this up and share it.
so it's a little different direction, the current version of the section. It does focus on liquid democracy as comparison to other democracy and decision-making methods. And it's more like a proposal than a review, okay? I use this document for seeing some old version, maybe, okay.
Is that the one that you wanted me to
Yes,
open?
you can
Can you
see
see it now?
some of different fonts even because I just keep.
That's okay, you just started it, so.
Yeah, just but the main character of this section now is more like an offer or proposal for diverse decision-making methods being implemented in different agreement structure. So I do.
Okay, I think that's fine. And what I want to check is that the proposal is specific to something that the dReps themselves will have to do.
Yeah,
So
so
potential examples I thought of is, for instance, the Catalyst community may need to write a code of conduct for the dReps. So that might be one use case. Another use case would be that a dRep forms a kind of working agreement with the people who are staking with them. You know, so for instance, a dRep has to decide on what projects they're going to vote on. They may want to write an agreement with people who are staking with them as to what the process is going to be for selecting projects to support. And then a third potential agreement would be, we don't have clear definition on this, but part of what the IOG group has communicated is that they will be encouraging dReps to work as a kind of council, and that council may have to form agreements as to how they work together. So those to me are three use cases for your tool that are of direct connection to the dRep program.
yeah, I understand, and it ended up for many other use cases that the community is waiting for us to complete the developing consents tool. But I right now in the current versions that we are seeing, the focus is I omitted almost all mentions of consents in the section. And
you don't have to do that. Okay.
Okay.
No, put your reference to your work. You know, it's you know, this is something between a review and a white paper. You know, so the white paper side of this, it's perfectly okay for you to be explaining to the community what your consents tool will be able to do and how it's useful to the community. The only thing that was important was that it be in the context of supporting the dReps process, because that's the focus of this white paper.
Can I just ask
Go ahead,
so,
Steve.
Yeah, just ask a question of Aaron on consents, the consents tool.
Mm-hmm.
When you're, let's say you're doing governance on an agreement, any agreement, are you able to apply different voting methods like you are? Okay, that's it, because I just want to raise something that might be interesting here. Okay, is that dReps is one way of voting. It's delegated representation. Yeah, sure. So that if you're relating agreements that are related to dReps, like for example a code of conduct, as Kenrick said, like for example coming up with other forms of governance that dReps do, what's interesting here with consents is that you may be introducing other voting methods to oversee that, to apply to that. You know, so that's just, I just want to raise that as something that would be interesting to flesh out a bit, you know.
Exactly. Thank you for this, Stephen, because actually this is the main point of the section right now, of how we can implement and practice different voting methods and different decision-making processes in the Catalyst governance whole process. And the dRep and the liquid democracy system is one of them that can be applied and can be adjusted for different classification of agreements. So I brought here the classification, the original classifications that I mentioned in the diagrams that is in the original paper right now, and the ways that we can use and diverse the decision-making methods and adjust them and match them for different agreement according to the classification. This is the main point of the section as it is now. The consent part will be in creating the agreement, but I'm not sure, Kenrick, right now, I'm not sure that the best direction will be to focus on specific use cases for the dRep and consent. It will take the section to another direction. Maybe it will, I can add maybe a few more paragraphs, but I'm not sure how current it will be.
Well, let me make this suggestion. I haven't read the new section that you put together, so I will do that, and then I'll provide more detailed feedback. But my thought is the following: since you've got a whole nother approach to this, is that take the first thing you wrote, put that aside, and I can work with you to make that an independent white paper for consents that your group releases for your own efforts, because that has a broader context. And so that could be one white paper. And then let me finish, Steve.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So then, assuming that this new section that you wrote has something is structured more to address the issues around dReps, then we'll use this in the dReps white paper. But let me go over it. And I'm not saying, and it shouldn't, it's still very appropriate to refer to consents directly, to use that. So we'll want to get that back into it. But the point is that it was important to improve the cohesiveness of your section with regard to how it's relevant to a dReps white paper.
Yeah, all I was going to say was, I agree with what you just said, Kenrick, and also I agree with including references to consents. I suppose that I'm seeing some similarity to what Steph was doing in terms of this new section that you're writing seems to be saying, let's take the high level view of what an agreement is, Aaron. So that what is a generic agreement, and that has analogous to what Steph did with his very general abstract example. And then what would be good, I think, in my opinion, would be to have, okay, here's an example. I don't think you should have lots of examples, but you could have, like, for example, the code of conduct for dReps or something like that, or something else. But so you would have something generic, a generic description of what this would look like in terms of liquid democracy under the using the consents model, the generic agreement, and then an application of that agreement in practice, in a practical, simple example. That's one suggestion. You don't have to go down that route.
I think that I have some clue of how to do it. Which paragraph I can add for the specific chapter in the section. Okay, I will take it into consideration, but yes, it is based on the previous work, but I rewritten it, so maybe it require another review session from the community. It's up to you to decide, and when and how to implement it into the current paper. It's also, I leave it to you, Eric, because I don't want, if I will do it now myself, it will delete all the current comments, and I think they are too valuable to
no, this was a good way to approach it, and I'll give you feedback within the next 24 hours on this new write-up and how we put the two, it'll be some kind of merging of the two is what we'll do. So that's really terrific. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, so then let me take some time. I want to go through a complete example of how to use Zotero to do your bibliography. And hopefully this is useful both to us and maybe other members of the community in terms of using Google Docs and Zotero together. So just as a refresher, well, actually, let's go back to the agenda first and make sure I'm not forgetting anything.
Yeah.
And in fact, I am forgetting something. So let's clarify the deadlines. I think, Steph, you're very close. And so can we set a deadline for Thursday for your section to be complete? And actually, I think you're going to have to cut back, and I'll help you with that, but there'll probably have to be some cutting back of their section. And again, whatever you cut out, of course, save, because you can use it for your own white paper and your own reporting, independent of this particular report. Do you think that's realistic, Steph, or is there more work to do?
The writing
Well,
is that's doable. Part of the, if there's something about a visualization that is not great or want to add or adjust, it's a little dependent on a few others. But I think let's say yes.
Okay, if you want to shift it to Monday, that should work fine. We can shift it. I hear, because you're right. It will take a little bit to make those changes in the visualization that I'm suggesting, and I do think that's an important thing to complete.
Cutting back, very doable.
Yeah. Given the new write-up from Aaron, I'm going to suggest Thursday of next week is the deadline on your section. And as I said, we'll plan to get you feedback on the new write-up within the next 24 hours so that you can progress with that. Okay. And then the idea here is that by the next meeting, which was 2 weeks from today, the editors will have completed and we will have a final product ready to go for release, and we'll be talking about how to release it. So the editors will have to be working towards making sure everything is clean and ready for publication.
Did we set a date for the editors meeting? It was the 20th, is it? Or
it should be the 20th. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
That's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I don't mean that as an editors meeting. I mean that the editors will have finished their work by the next group meeting on the 20th.
Okay. That's also helpful. Yeah, that's it just gives us a thumbnail sketch of what we need to do. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go back. Okay. I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the paper and use Andre's comment about referencing these two organizations and their use of liquid democracy. And just for reference, I mean, Phil, who's the author of this, can change this, and he probably already has these references in mind, but I think it's a nice example. So what I'm gonna show you how I would find a reference for this. So I'm gonna cut this phrase. I'm gonna open a new window, and Google has a terrific Scholar search tool. And I'm gonna paste that in, and I'm gonna add liquid democracy. All right, and now I'm just going to scroll through, and it's not always the first. These are listed by the number of citations. So, and you'll notice here what you're getting back is research articles published in journals. It tells you how many citations that that paper has had. So this would be preference since it's been highly cited, whereas all the other ones don't look like they've had many citations. And for instance, an overview of 10 years of liquid democracy research, that's probably a good paper. I'm guessing that would be good to add to our database. And it does look like it references the Pirate Party. So that might be the one we want. Let's see. This one, social media and perspectives of liquid democracy on the example of political communication and Pirate Party in Germany. Okay, so let me just concentrate on this one. Now what I can do is I can add, this is the link to this proceedings. On the right here, if the PDF is available, you can go to the paper itself. But let me do this one first. All right, now Google Books might be a little bit more challenging. But let's see what Zotero does with this. So now I have the extension installed for Zotero. And okay, it's this one right here. This mark here is for Zotero. So when I press that, it's going to add this proceedings, and it's going to add it as a whole book. I don't know. That's the whole proceedings, though. That's not what we really want. Let me try a different way. Let me go back. We really want the reference to this particular article, not the whole proceedings. So let me try opening this PDF and see if it gets it better that way. No, that's not helpful either. So this one's going to be a little bit more challenging. Yeah, that's the whole book, so that's not helpful. Let me try this one and see what this is.
I think I've read that paper. That's quite familiar. I think it's might be in the database already, actually.
Yeah, it may very well be. In fact, let me okay, well, let me try again. It's in an overview. Okay, so then it is adding that, and it's adding it to the folder on liquid democracy, and so that's done. All right, so we have a couple. I think the other one got added. Zotero kind of automatically adds them rather than having another button to go ahead and add. So now let me go and look at this, and I believe there's going to need to be some synchronization here. Okay, well, there it is. There's the one that we just did. And as you said, it was actually already in here. So we actually have 2 copies of it now. I'm going to use this one. This one looks a little bit more complete.
Yeah.
And so all the reference material looks like it's in there. So now what I can do is I can go back to the paper and do the following. I'm going to do it for both since that's a general paper. I think that paper might include some of the things about the Sweden group too.
Yeah, it does.
You can double check it, but so now, okay, the Zotero, I think, let me just reopen this. Okay, there it goes, yeah. I had to refresh the page because I opened Zotero after I opened the page. So the way this works is different tools are different, but the Zotero one is dependent on your desktop application. So that has to be open in order for the links to work properly.
Yeah, and I don't see Zotero in the Google Doc as a drop-down menu like you have.
Yeah, so what you have to do is you have to go to your extensions and add an extension. If you go to manage add-ons, you'll find one for Zotero. It has to be added to your Google Docs application.
Okay.
I don't think I'll go through that process right now. Maybe at the end of this, if we still have some time, I can we can go back to that, but let me continue. So assuming you've added Zotero as a add-on application to Google Docs, it'll be in here as a menu item. And you can add that citation. And it's asking me to re-sign in. Surprising, but okay, let me do that. Just a minute, it brought up another window to have me sign in. All right, and you're not, I don't think you're going to be able to see this because it works with the desktop application, but it opened up the Zotero desktop with a window for me to, like a search. So I'm going to, maybe someone can remind me what the title of that paper was. That we
10 years
Oh, 10 years, yeah, okay, 10.
of liquid democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got it in two.
Pauline or something. Pauline, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I've got it, and I'm going to press return, and it's processing that, and it should pop up in just a moment if it doesn't get stuck. Okay, there it goes. All right, so now that's our first reference, and we can go all the way to the bottom. We'll have one bibliography for the whole thing because the tool doesn't allow you to have different sections for the bibliographies. So if I scroll all the way down to the bottom here.
Right.
Okay, and now this is the references, and let me see if, let's see, under Zotero, I'm going to refresh. And I thought that would come up, but I don't see it. So that's interesting. Not sure why.
We're slightly over time, but
Yeah.
This is useful, I think, for a general viewer.
Yeah,
I would say that is one person or like yourself going to be responsible for formatting all the references for the document?
Okay, it did do it in there.
Yeah.
Things are a little bit different. Yeah, so it is in there now. I had to add it again. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
What I would say about this is that the authors should be adding their citations to their section. That is the author's responsibility.
Right.
However, I, myself, and the other editors will be working with you. If you have trouble with the Zotero tool, then you can just add a comment as to which citation you want where. And that will make it possible for myself or one of the other editors to add it for you.
Yeah.
And the only other thing, if you don't mind, I know we're over time, but just to address Steph's question, if you go to extensions here and the add-ons, and I say, let me try managing add-ons.
I might have to download.
I have a particular. Yeah,
So I don't even have manage. I don't have the ability to click on manage add-ons. So I probably have to get more. Either like
if you're working under a Wolfram account for Google, then you may need some administrative help to add an add-on. I have a work. Yeah, okay, there it goes. Let me see if that worked.
I'd like to be detailed about leaving my citations in the paper so that I could receive help on.
Yeah, that's fine, Steph. That's fine. Do that. And this, yeah, it's a little bit different anyway. So, all right, let me finish with this since we're at the end of our meeting anyway. Let me just close this one out. Okay. All right, I will go back to the agenda.
It's okay because it's at the end of the meeting, so we can timestamp it out
all right,
anyway.
so I'll just stop sharing.
So it is kind of, if people want to see, you know, Zotero in action. I mean, obviously there are different permutations of it, as you say, Kenrick. There's the local application that you can install on your machine and how that works with the web extension, and you know, so, and there's also depends what permissions you have, you know, so
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there, if that's, well, then I suppose we could wrap up now with the actual meeting.
Thank you, Ergo. This is great.
And yeah, thank you everyone for, that was a great little second community review. We're able to go over the comments in quite a lot of detail. It was very helpful. I found the visualizations very helpful. So if there's no more comments, I'll just stop the recording and we can start the informal part of the meeting. So I'll stop the recording now.